ton of smoke in the sky, but it almost feels like it's gonna rain. I think it predicted it's supposed to rain on Friday or Saturday. I think it's much needed actually, even though you can't like fly or anything like that during the rain. I guess those fall leaves colors are coming soon too. As expected today, DJI announced the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 2 Zoom. So I basically spent a lot of time in the morning just watching videos, reading the literature to see would you upgrade, for example, if you actually already own a Mavic Pro. At the same time, how good is the drone, I guess, on its own if you actually don't even own one yet. As you guys know, I've flown the drone, the Mavic Pro, virtually every single day since it came out, as long as the weather cooperated. So in terms of upgrading a drone, for me, it piqued my interest a lot, but did they actually capture like a person like me to immediately go, okay, I'm buying it now? That's why I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. My general thought before watching the event was hopefully the image quality would be improved dramatically, because for myself, from flying it for so much, I would say one of the complaints is, for example, in low light, it's just not very good, especially when you start adding things like color and all that. At the same time, the gimbal itself, I think that's probably one of the weakest points of the Mavic Pro. I'm sure a lot of people have had issues with that in terms of the gimbal, for example, just going haywire, going crazy. Did I have high expectations of this event? In some ways, yes, just because it's been so long since the Mavic Pro came out, so I was assuming there must be a lot of awesome things about this, or at the same time, maybe they're doing it just for shipment reasons, like they want to get it right. So I started to watch the stream, and in the beginning, it's kind of funny how so many people in the chat were like, there's no sound, there's no sound. That's usually typical when people have these conferences. They only turn the sound on when the event starts, so it's kind of funny in that sense. But overall, I think the presentation, as they started to go through it, it felt very, how do you explain it? Very corporate? I don't know, it didn't excite me as much with the way it was presented personally. I just don't know why. It seemed very typical, okay, let's bring the drone in here, show this, that, voila, now buy it. It was kind of interesting how they opened up their presentation more about safety, I guess, like for using drones, like how they can be helpful in the world, as opposed to just entirely cinematography. They talked about that story that we talked about before, where the person was lost, like the climber in the mountain, and everyone assumed like maybe he's dead, but then someone flew a Mavic Pro and then they can see, hey, there he is, and they rescued him afterwards. So it's kind of interesting that they started off with that. In many ways, I think that's good, because for a lot of people, like with the drones, even if you buy it, it still comes down to things like, can you actually fly it somewhere? At the same time, a lot of people assume people that have drones are just using it to spy and all that, whereas this gives you an example where even everyday people or an average person could use it in a good way. So I think it's good anyways to highlight a point like that. So maybe it wasn't a surprise to many people, because I'm sure a lot of people read the leaks. They announced two models for the Mavic 2, the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 2 Zoom. And the main difference is with the Pro, it has a 1-inch sensor, so technically there should be a higher quality camera on this, whereas the Mavic 2 Zoom, it has an optical zoom feature, which according to this has 2 times optical zoom. I guess another way to think about it is, do you want something that's better quality or something that has more features? Like for the zoom, for example, it says they have this automatic dolly zoom, which is basically like a vertigo effect. I've done it quite a few times, even with the Mavic Pro, but it just required some video editing, where basically as you're going back, for example, you can see the background zooming in or vice versa. So to me personally, just from my experience, I'd rather have the better camera than a feature like that, but it really depends on what your purpose is for the drone. For me personally, since I capture more things like scenery when I go to the hikes, the mountain views and all that, I'd rather have the better camera as opposed to the zoom. Like, this is my personal preference anyways. But then that brings an interesting point, because that created a lot of division here, it seems. Because everyone's kind of wondering, or a lot of people saying, why are you releasing 2 different cameras? Why make people buy 2 different drones in that sense? Some people were actually thinking with that leak before, it looked like you could actually remove the camera, so it's interchangeable. Whereas this, you pretty much have to spend like money buying 2 different drones, so people are saying, why? So that's one of the negatives in that sense, in terms of creating, I guess, division. At the same time, it makes people wonder, I guess, like, is it basically in the user's best interest to have this option? Or do people feel they're being kind of, I guess, gouged in a way? I guess for me, in terms of options, it's different if it's a minor part. Like, for example, to my understanding, both these drones now have internal memory, so they're emphasizing the point how no more forgetting your SD card and then, nope, you can't shoot anymore. I mean, I've done that a few times. But like options like that, if you said this drone has, I don't know, 32 gigabytes of internal memory, this one has 8, those kinds of options I'm usually okay with. I mean, if people want to pay higher, then go for it. But the other way around, I don't know, to me as well, it seems a little weird not to give people or try to put both those options in one. Now obviously there's probably limitations with things like the size, which I get it, but yeah, still again, with those options it kind of makes you wonder if you just hold off, because there was also that other image leak of the Mavic 2 Enterprise. I mean, does that one have both features? Then again, that drone's probably going to be like super expensive. Although funny enough, during the presentation, I was actually checking the site itself just to see if they updated that faster than the actual video to find out things like the prices, and they did. So eventually, basically, I found out the price here. It says for the Mavic 2 Pro, the one with the 1-inch sensor, will be $1,149 US, and the Mavic 2 Zoom will be $1,249. So is that expensive? I think on its own it's expensive, whereas I guess some people would say for the features you're getting, how compact it is, no, it's totally worth it. So it depends on what side of the fence you're on, so to speak, or camp rather. And again, my perspective again is coming from a person who has flown this like what, probably over 1,000 times, and what does this travel distance calculate this thing by? It says like almost 1 million, is it meters or miles? Anyways, like I've flown it a lot, so it's coming more from the perspective, is it worth it to upgrade from what I see, and based on things like the price, is it like affordable? Like for most people who aren't given the drone for free, for example, or any type of heavy discount. One thing I was a little disappointed about, they actually mentioned in the actual presentation, basically this new Mavic 2 has less noise, like when it flies, but they actually didn't demonstrate it to see, okay, how less noisy is it really? So that was a little disappointing they didn't show that. Maybe it wasn't as quiet as you would think. So with that, after watching the presentation, I guess it's a matter of trying to see what it looks like from other people, at the same time trying to go through this spec sheet to kind of determine, again, is it worth it? So far, from what I saw with things like the price, it's still like, oh, it's kind of steep for an upgrade, which I'm kind of, unsure of. If it had all the features meshed in, then yeah, you can kind of see it. But at the moment, it just makes you wonder, should I wait? Flying your drone at certain temperatures is always a concern, because some people say, for example, like with the Mavic Pro, don't fly below 0 degrees Celsius or too hot. But this one here, it says on the site here, it says the operating temperature range is -10 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius. So for this one, is it that's that much more sturdier that it's meant to be flown in the extreme cold and stuff like that? Like that was actually, it wasn't brought up to my knowledge in the presentation, but that's interesting in terms of a factor to upgrade to that drone. It advertised here that the flight time will be about 31 minutes, I guess, like in an ideal situation. So that's probably going to be like, what, realistically 26, 27? Because actually, what was the Mavic advertised as? Basically like a 27-minute flight. But essentially, in the default settings anyways, this thing is gonna like beep like crazy, like the things in the controller when your battery's about 30%, so you don't realistically get to use it all. Unless you're trying to do something crazy like testing, oh, let me see how far this can fly, and basically people having like a near crash and all that. Actually makes me wonder if they gave you an option to reduce that really irritating low battery sound, like even with the, if it's right next to you, like here, you just want to capture like just things like, let's just say this tree here and I'm so low, it's right in front of me, isn't there a way to turn off that sound? I get it, you're low battery. They actually didn't talk about that. It seems in the weight department, the drone actually got heavier, not by much, but it's about, it says here, the Mavic 2 Pro is 907 grams and the Mavic 2 Zoom is 905 grams. What's the Mavic Pro at? Like about 700 or something like that? Now, why this is kind of an important detail is not necessarily to say, oh my god, it's so much heavier now, which, it could be for some people if you do things like hiking a lot. But what I was thinking about in terms of the weight was things like the regulations. Because in buying a drone before, one of the reasons that I chose a Mavic Pro, like for the weight and size, is one thing to carry around, but another thing is when you buy a drone that not a lot of people think about is, can you actually fly the thing where you are? Like here in Canada anyways, there's currently a weight classification system where if you got something like say a Phantom, you can't fly that thing in as many places as say a Mavic Pro just due to things like the weight. So that's something to consider. Like I don't think that's going to be too big of a difference. It's below like the 1 kilogram threshold in terms of the classes for a lot of places, but that's something to think about too for a lot of people. Like in their presentation, they show these hyper time-lapse mode of the drone going through the city and so forth. Like here, good luck doing that without getting like a lot of approvals and all that stuff. Because just with the portability about, having a drone that you'll at least use and bring it with you, if you're buying a drone, make sure you can actually fly it where you are. So after reading all this stuff afterwards, you have to think of what I would call the real cost of owning this drone. Like for example, the Mavic 2 Pro is $1,449, but what if you want to fly for longer amounts of time? So that means more batteries, for example. How about things like the accessories? I would say if you're trying to capture things cinematically, like for the view and stuff, then things like filters are essential. And then what's that? Like another $150 to $200 US. So it all starts to add up. So the real cost of this, in my opinion, like for a person like me who already has a drone, you'll probably be spending like almost 1,800 to 2,000 US. That's pretty hefty. That's really expensive, at least like here for a Canadian price as well. Because again, keep in mind, I'm basically thinking of it more from someone who already has a drone. Is it worth it to upgrade it? Like in my case, I already have all this stuff already. So is it worth it? I think I can see rays of sunlight there. You just need a really dark filter to cover that. Actually, funny example here. This is an example where it'd be better to have a better dynamic range because it just looks way darker on the bottom than the top right now. You gotta kind of just pick your choice on what you want to shoot. Like in that sense, it'd be better to have the better camera with a 1-inch sensor and all. And one of the most important points to always think about is, do you actually need it? Like a person like myself, do I actually need this new drone? And what was the purpose of getting a drone in the first place? Ultimately, it was to capture things like the perspective. Like I said before, when you go to things like a hike, for example, so many times I went up there, I was like, I really want a view of this, and I could do this now with my Mavic. But as I've been flying for all this time, going on different adventures, I find that at times you need a better quality. And the other reason why I would potentially want to buy one is because with things like regulations and stuff, like I would assume that's why they show things like in the beginning of the presentation, how it could be used for good. It seems like a person like myself who's always going out, basically at times trying to educate people, showing people, hey, drones, they're nothing to be afraid of. Having a higher quality drone in many ways is essential because people will judge things based on quality. That's how they emotionally connect with things. So that helps in the presentation. But the price and the fact that everything has like kind of different features and so forth, and that I already invested in this, it doesn't really, I don't know, it's not like an instant, oh my god, I need this. If it had things like what we said before, like, hey, let's just say it's now weatherproof, that's a little different, like you jump into it now. Would you upgrade this to that though? Because in many ways to me, it almost feels like, say, a smartphone upgrade for the year. Like, yes, it's better in that sense, but is it worth it for that price to upgrade? That, I don't know. That's why I'm still on the fence, because I didn't get any discounts or anything like that for someone who uses it so much. Like, even though I educate the public and so forth, it's still a lot of money, like to basically plunk down on that. Unless I was doing it as a commercial business, and that's a little different. Like in that case, I would say like, yeah, you need the latest and greatest because you're basically offering a service to people. But in my case, I'm doing it for fun. So is it worth it? I'm still on the fence, honestly, personally. Because another thought too, just by looking at the price, this is technically almost the same price, if not, yeah, it is exactly the same as a Phantom 4 Pro. So if it is just quality that you want, like for commercials, would you rather get the Pro, like in terms of the Mavic, or get the Phantom in that sense? This is the exact same price. Holy, that squirrel's a lot of food. Like here, a zoom camera would be good. All right, see you guys later.